I was wiping dust from the side mirror of my 2012 Subaru Outback when the mechanic came running out of the bay, wiping his hands on a red rag. "Sir," he said, catching his breath, "I don't want to scare you, but somebody wanted your brakes to fail." They didn't wear out. They were cut. For a moment I just stared at him, the mountain air suddenly thinner than before. At 4 this afternoon I was supposed to drive down to meet the lawyer about my late wife's inheritance, papers we'd been waiting on for 6 months. If I hadn't stopped for that oil change, I might have gone off a guardrail somewhere between here and the valley. I looked at the Subaru, at the scratches, the old coffee stain on the passenger seat, the faint scent of her perfume that still clung to the upholstery. Someone had planned for this car to be my coffin. I drove home at 20 miles an hour, hands at 10 and 2 like a teenager in a test. Early snow cut the daylight with its soft pencil. The wipers made a tired swish, and every time they swept, I touched the pocket watch on the dashboard. My father gave it to me the day I left for Vietnam and said, "Wind it every morning. Keep time even when the world does not." It had outlived him, then Mary, and now it was ticking at me like a metronome that kept men from running. Our little house sat back from the street behind the low stone wall Mary and I stacked when we were 25, and sure, the world rewarded people who showed up with a shovel. The porch light burned yellow against the gray. Her scarf hung by the door where I always leave it. It felt heavier around my neck, as if the wool had absorbed the afternoon. My name is David Evans. I am 65, a widower, a grandfather, and the man this house still recognizes when the door opens. I keep 3 anchors close: Mary's scarf, my father's pocket watch, and the leather ledger Mary and I filled when the numbers were small and the years were long. I believe in winding what must be wound and writing what must be remembered. In a town this size, alarms travel faster than truth, and the police, good as they are, want what I did not yet have: proof. What I had was a pattern with Ray and a mechanic's photograph of a clean cut. So I did what steadies me, stepped inside, breathed, and chose paper over panic. Mary used to say, "Make the record first, then make the call." I would build a timeline and a wall of ink before I handed anyone a story to twist. The law would be my tool. The ledger, my first witness. Only then would there be time for reports and statements. I called the lawyer's office and canceled the 4 o'clock. Today was for paper, not appointments. I did not call the police. I did not call Ray. I unlocked the door, stepped into the hush that always comes after snow, and went straight to the oak desk that had held our taxes, our Christmas lists, and Mary's notes in ink that never faded. The leather-bound ledger creaked open. It is not a fancy book. The leather is scuffed, the corners rounded, but it has our life in it. Mortgage payments from 1984 when we scraped and saved. Notes on repairs. Tiny budgets that stretch Sundays into paydays. An entire section with Ray's name. I had not planned it that way. I just needed a place to put his request so my memory could not pretend we had not already helped him. I let my hand hover over that section. I did not need the exact numbers to know what they added up to in me. Small last helps, then, "I swear this is the last," then, "Just until the end of the month, Uncle." It was not a fraud in a movie. It was nickels becoming dollars, dollars becoming months of steady leaks. He borrowed my car for a charity run last week and brought it back with gas. He always brought things back with something. This time, maybe he had planned to bring me back myself. Quiet. I drew a line in the ledger that felt like I was cutting something I should have cut years ago and wrote, November 10th. Sabotage discovered. Cost avoided. Life. I paused. The pocket watch ticked. The scarf warmed my neck. There is calm in writing what is true. The phone buzzed face down on the desk. A text from Ray. "Heard you had car trouble. You okay?" Heard. The word stuck. The mechanic, me, and the hands that held the cutters. That made 3. He said small town. I thought line of sight. Ray has a way of hearing what he should not hear. He has a way of being near what should be far from him. I put the phone upside down and let it vibrate a few more times while I brewed coffee. In the kitchen, the calendar still showed Mary's handwriting last December. Her last week of notes. Doctor on Monday, Anita brings soup Tuesday, David rest Wednesday. The pen pressure is lighter at the end. She was trying to husband strength like flour. You do not move on from a woman like that. You move with her memory. You keep the scarf where you can see it and the ledger where the light is good. You wind the watch. You use paper as a shield because paper does not get drawn into shouting. At 8, the knock came hard enough to put a hairline crack in the paint. I left the chain on. Ray stood on my porch with his coat unzipped and his hair wet from snow, like he had rushed here from a bar he was not drinking in. He smiled a fraction too late. "Uncle David," he said, leaning close like we were about to share a secret. I came over as soon as I heard. "Everything okay?" "From whom?" I asked. "Did you hear?" He blinked, then dredged up that laugh he keeps for cocktail servers and landlords. "Small town," he said, spreading his hands. "Mechanic's a talker." "I know people." He tilted his head and tried to look past me. He has always treated thresholds like invitations. "We should talk about the house anyway," he said. "The timing. Since you are alone now, it has to feel big." He meant empty. He meant ripe. "I am alive," I said. "The car is in the driveway." That is what there is to talk about tonight. "Aunt Mary used to say this place should stay in the family," he said, like a man putting his palm on a Bible, trying to make the book swear to him. "She did," I said. "That is why it is staying with me." His smile slipped. His eyes went hard. "I could help," he said. "Paperwork is confusing when you are grieving." "I can take that off your hands." "I have a lawyer for that," I said. He blinked and held the smile again, like someone holding a heavy box, not sure how long he can. "Is that necessary?" he asked. "Being careful is necessary," I said. "A man with cut brake lines learns that in a hurry." His jaw shifted. He put an elbow on the doorframe and went casual. "Saw that mechanic," he said, "and I am not sure he knows what he is seeing." Rubber cracks. You know how it is. He had just admitted to being in earshot of the story, if not of the car. I looked over his shoulder and saw snow falling in a tight circle in the porch light. I thought of Mary's scarf, of my granddaughter's game of winding the watch and asking me to tell a story with every turn. "I will pass your evaluation along," I said. He leaned in. "Uncle David, this is not adversarial. We are family. If the house goes through probate, it is messy. Better to just move it now. To me. Tradition. Aunt Mary—" "My wife loved truth more than tradition," I said. "She would not have loved this conversation." His voice went flat. "It is not yours alone," he said. "Tonight," I said, "it is." I closed the door with the chain still on. I did not slam it. Slamming doors feels good, but wastes what you just learned. He stood on the porch a long moment. The snow took his breath in little clouds that looked like speech bubbles with nothing inside them. Then he went away. The scarf tightened around my neck without my hand. I sat at the desk and did not write anger. I wrote plan. Morning comes early to a man who has decided something. I wound the watch at 7, like my father taught me. I wrapped the scarf before step 1 out the door, like Mary would have insisted. I put the ledger under my arm, not for proof, but for posture. Then I called Marcus. He had been Mary's friend since their college days, when the only suits he owned were worn to funerals and job interviews. He became our attorney, the kind that tells you what to do without talking down to you. 2 o'clock, he said when I told him the bare facts. Bring your book. His office was on the second floor of a Victorian that had survived a century by refusing to be abused. The waiting room smelled like lemon oil and the kind of coffee that tastes comforting even if it is cheap. A small Christmas tree blinked, stubborn against the gray outside. Marcus shook my hand with a grip that said the ground was steady. "Tell me," he said. I told him the mechanic's words. I told him about Ray on the porch, using the word tradition, the way a man uses a pry bar. I told him about small loans that had not come home again. I did not list the dates and dollar amounts. I held up the ledger like a carpenter holding up a shop notebook, where the math does not lie even when people do. "Your wife's will leaves everything to you," he said without looking down. "No nephew in the world can claim a sponge when the sink is not his. We will put the house and your car in a living trust with you as trustee. It is still yours, but it is in a box that is harder for other people's hands to enter." "It feels like building a fence with paper," I said. "It is," he said. "Paper does not pick sides, it just holds shape." He opened a red folder and set a pin where the yellow tabs flagged me. I read enough to know the shape. He translated the parts where the language had been written by men who liked to be paid by the comma. The notary came in and witnessed me being steady. When she stamped the page, the sound was like a hammer on the head of a nail I had been circling for a year. "You are doing the right thing," she said. "Families can be messy. Paperwork is clean." The county clerk sat behind glass that had been cleaned that morning. She took what we slid under, stamped what needed stamping, and said, "Filed." The word felt like a friend sitting down next to you without asking if the seat is taken. On the way home, I bought new locks. I bought a deadbolt longer than the old one, the kind with screws that bite deeper into the frame than an impatient hand. The clerk bagged them and said, "Big storm coming," and I did not correct him. Back at the house, I set the pocket watch on the table and let it tick while I turned screws. I used the time to choose the long screws that reach past the pretty wood into the ugly beam. A man who has lived long enough learns which wood holds and which wood just looks like it. The phone rang at 2:17. Ray had learned about the filing from the county quicker than I thought. He skipped hello. "What do you mean you put the house into a trust?" he asked, like he had smelled something burning and wanted me to say it was toast. "I mean what I said," I said. "This is crazy," he said. "You did not even talk to me." "You are not my executor," I said. "You are my nephew." "So I do not matter," he said. "You matter enough that I am making sure you do not have to feel tempted by something that is not yours," I said. He swallowed air. "You had no right." "I had every right." "You are making this hard," he said. "No," I said. "I am making it clear." He hung up like he expected the phone to scream when it hit its cradle. It did not. Phones have learned to take more than people have. He came in person at dusk with his coat unbuttoned and his shoes wet. I had 2 mugs of coffee waiting, because I am not an unkind man and because coffee buys time. He pushed past me without asking and stood in the middle of the room like a surveyor. He saw the scarf. He saw the ledger. He saw the pocket watch on the table ticking in a polite voice. "What is this trust nonsense?" he demanded, the word trust coming out like a pill he was not sure he should swallow. "You have gone behind my back. After everything I have done for you and Aunt Mary," I slid a mug toward him. He ignored it. He likes other people's heat, not his own. "I did not go behind your back," I said. "There is no behind. There is the front door, which I have just locked. You are choosing a piece of paper over family. I am choosing to define family more honestly," I said. "Family is not a word you say when you want to move into someone else's house." His face hardened. "You kept track," he said, nodding at the ledger like it was a camera that had caught him stealing cookies. "You wrote down every time I needed help." "You going to charge me interest, Uncle? Put me on a payment plan? You think you are a bank?" "I wrote because memory lies," I said. "Paper does not." "You have turned into a miser," he said. "I have turned into a man who can say no," I said. You always thought you were better than me, he said, aiming for a soft spot that used to exist. No, I said. I thought I had to keep you from drowning. Turns out the river is not mine to dam. He set his hand on the back of the chair where Mary used to sit and looked at his fingers on the wood like he might leave marks that would stick. His eyes glanced at the scarf and then at the watch, and something changed in his face. Not remorse. He moves too fast for that, but recognition that there were things in this room he would never own. You cannot just lock me out, he said. I did not lock you out, I said. I locked temptation out. He left without touching the coffee. The door clicked shut with a sound that made the room feel warmer. I wrote in the ledger. Ray came in heat. I stayed on temperature. The next days were quiet the way a house is quiet when it knows it has been defended. I shoveled snow. I fixed the loose board on the porch that Mary always stepped over instead of nagging me about. I took slow walks to the cemetery and told her I had used the law instead of a shout. I told her I would have done it sooner if I had not been busy hauling grief around like firewood. You would have laughed at how easy it was, I said to her stone. You always said paperwork was the one thing we could control. That Sunday, my daughter brought my granddaughter over for cocoa. The little one likes to hold the pocket watch in both hands and make it tick out loud, and ask me to tell a story each time the second hand reaches noon. Tell the one about Grandma's scarf, she said, patting the wool where it hung. So I did. I told her about a winter the year she was born, when Mary knit it too long by accident, and then laughed and said, Well, then it will loop twice, and looped it around my neck and kissed my cheek and said, There, now it will smell like you. The girl listened like she always does, with a seriousness that could teach adults how to be. Tell me the car one, she said, lowering her voice. The one you do not tell Mama all the parts of. Someday, I said, and she nodded like she understood that stories ripen. On a Tuesday, my credit card company called to ask about a hard inquiry last summer. I asked them to flag my account. I did not write the name of the representative or the case number. In the ledger I wrote, I do not like surprises. Whenever anger flared, I directed it to a page. Anger runs out of gas when confronted with ink. Marcus called the week after to say Ray had hired a lawyer who spelled my name wrong. They are threatening to contest, he said. They will fail, I said, and I was not being brave. I was reading the shape of the thing we had already built. Most do, he said. People talk like law is made of fog. It is more like a fence post. 2 days later, an envelope arrived from the court with my name spelled right. A hearing was set. The petition called me confused, and my trust suspicious. It cited a statute that does not exist in our state. It alleged an unknown party had influenced me. I read it without feeling insulted because I had learned in the last year who I am and what I am not. I am a man who winds a watch, who writes things down, who knows when to keep a door on a chain, and who knows when to open it for a grandchild. I am not easily influenced except by the kind of woman who writes, "Eat your peas," on a calendar and means, live. I sat at the desk and wrote in the ledger. His petition uses words that blow smoke. Ours uses a stamp. Ray called that night. We could still work this out, he said. It does not have to be court. You could sign a quit claim. We could do it quietly. You tried quietly, I said. You cut quietly. You borrowed quietly. We are done with quiet that hides things. I prefer the kind that holds. He took a breath that might have been for a speech, then let it out like he did not need words after all. You are cruel, he said. You are punishing me. This is not revenge, I said, voice steady. It is correction. What does that mean? It means I stop participating in your script, I said. It means I learn to say no and write it down. He hung up without calling me uncle. He reverted to David when he was trying to charm, and to old man if he needed to make me small. He had no name for me when I said no and meant it. At the hearing, the judge gave Ray's lawyer a few minutes to make the case that I had been carried like a leaf into a trust by forces I did not understand. The woman looked at me over her glasses like she hoped I would look at the floor. I watched the judge instead. Marcus said little. He submitted the recorded deed, my signature, the notary's stamp, and the plain fact that I had walked into his office on my own 2 feet, without a nephew anywhere near them. The judge asked 2 questions I could have answered with my eyes closed, and one I did answer with the scarf around my neck and the watch ticking in my pocket. "Mr. Evans," she said, "did you understand the documents you signed?" "I did," I said. "I understood them the way you understand a door when you close it to the wind." She dismissed the petition with prejudice. The words looked like iron brackets around a sentence. Marcus slid the paper to me. He had circled the phrase, and in the margin he had written, "Merry Christmas." I felt relief rise, but deep inside I laughed. Paper can end a lawsuit and still leave a man scheming. You would not believe what is going to happen next. But before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. Ray did not come to my door that night. He did not call. The house felt like a house again and not a set piece in someone else's plan. The absence of pressure does something to a man who has been braced. My shoulders dropped. My mornings lengthened. I noticed the bird that sits on the maple branch like it owns the next 30 seconds. I joined a pottery class at the community center because my hands needed something to shape that was not a plan. The wheel's hum steadied me. Clay teaches you to keep a steady touch. Too much pressure and the wall collapses, too little and it wobbles. Louisa, the instructor, told me I had patience. I told her I was learning it late. I started attending a support group for caregivers and widowers at the library. We sat in a circle with chairs that had seen better days and said the kinds of things you do not say at the grocery store. A man named Vince said, "Documentation is liberation." I liked it enough to write it in the ledger. A woman named Carla said her brother had tried to take their mother's house. She recorded a life estate and slept better. We nodded as if we were hearing familiar lyrics set to a tune we finally liked. Ray's name floated through the small town like a leaf on a gutter stream. Someone told me his truck was on a tow hook. Another said he moved back home. An old classmate of his posted a photo of him smiling too wide. None of it felt like news that demanded reaction. I wrote it down as if I was a farmer tracking rainfall, useful, but not something I could influence. I took the Outback to the mechanic again and told him to replace everything rubber between my foot and the road. He did, and I paid without flinching because there are things a man learns not to skimp on after he sees what it looks like when someone wants him to fall. He tried to apologize for the first day's shock. I told him he saved my life by being honest. He shrugged and said, "I like you alive." In February, the county sent the recorded deed back with a red stamp at the top. It felt heavier than paper. I set it on the kitchen table with the ledger and the watch and the scarf, and took a photograph that made me feel like I was building a small museum to a marriage. I printed the photo and glued it inside the back cover of the ledger and wrote, "Anchors." Marcus invited me in to finalize the trust's internal instructions. We did not spend long. It did not require long. I picked successors for after me. We set gifts for the library and the food bank because Mary would have smiled to see their names on our paper. He asked me whether I wanted to designate someone to get the Outback when I was gone. I thought of my granddaughter and the way she looks at the world like it is a book she knows will have a twist but will end all right. She is 6, I said. In a decade she will need something reliable. Give her the car when I am done with it? Marcus nodded and wrote it down. He is the kind of man who can make sentences that hold for years. On a gray Thursday, Ray tried one more angle. He waited outside the grocery store and timed his approach for when I came out with 2 bags. He moved fast, put himself between me and the car like a barricade dressed in denim. "I could forgive you," he said, like he was being generous. "For what?" I asked. "For making me do this," he said. "For forcing me into court." "You chose court," I said. "You chose a lawyer," he said. I chose not to die on a mountain road, I said. He spread his hands, palms up, the way he does when he wants to look unarmed. We could still fix this. You could sign a paper. I could take care of the place. You could move into something easier. This place is not hard, I said. It is ours. Aunt Mary wanted it to stay in the family, he said again. She did, I said. And the family she meant is the one that built it and paid for it and changed its locks and keeps its ledgers. You are a part of that family by love if you act like it. You are not a shareholder. He looked at the bags, and I could feel the old impulse to offer him one, to ask if he needed anything. The watch ticked like a small hammer tapping me awake. I set the bags in the car without breaking eye contact and closed the door. "This is cruel," he said. "This is a boundary," I said. They can look the same to the person who wanted what was on the other side. "How long are you going to keep this up?" he asked, like stubbornness was some new affectation I had picked up late in life like woodworking. "As long as it takes," I said. He stepped aside. He had learned not to touch my door handles. That night I wrote in the ledger. He tried the parking lot. I tried the truth. The scarf smelled of cedar when I pulled it off. The watch sounded content when I set it on the table. I made a small pot of stew because the kitchen is where I fix things that are not paper. Winter sagged into that gray time where snow turns tired, and the walk to the mailbox is where you see your breath and check your steps so you do not skid. I received a notice for the Trust's annual report, $25. I mailed the check and wrote, "Maintenance of a wall." The phrase felt right. The point was not to build a fortress and hide inside it. The point was to live with the windows open and the doors locked, which is not a contradiction if you have a key. I started a woodworking class at the high school one evening a week. The shop smelled like sawdust and old ambition. The instructor taught me dovetail joints, and I made a box for the scarf. I carved Mary's initials into the lid and sanded them down until my finger could find them without my eyes. At break, the instructor told us he volunteered at the legal aid clinic. "We are seeing more elder exploitation," he said, "but people are getting smarter. They are learning the words we learned in law school and using them on their own kitchen tables." I slept that night like a man who has finally put his back to a wall. Still, dreams found me. In one, the guardrail I never hit unspooled like a ribbon, and Mary tied it into a bow, neat as a gift. In another, Ray's hands, always moving, turned into a blur of signatures that did not belong to him. I woke before dawn to the watch's soft ticking and the sound of snow against the window, a whisper that kept its own counsel. I wound the watch at 7 and stood a long time with the scarf in my hands. Wool has a way of remembering the shape of a neck. It draped itself where it had learned to fall. I brewed coffee and sat at the desk. The ledger lay open, today's page blank. That used to make me anxious, as if blank meant empty. Now it felt like permission. By mid-morning, word had traveled faster than weather. My cousin Evelyn called to say she had heard rumors that I had cut the family out and gone behind Mary's wishes. She did not sound accusatory, just curious, the way people in small towns are when they have only heard half a story and want to know whether to feel bad about it. "Come by," I said. "I will pour you coffee and show you the wall I built with paper." She came wrapped in a parka and concern. I did not perform for her. I put the red folder on the table like a spare place setting and let her read the top lines, the stamps, the signature with the notary seal that made my hand steadier just looking at it. I pointed at the ledger the way a man points at a map. "I wrote because memory is a liar," I said. "I signed because we needed a fence." She put a hand on my wrist in a way that said she had raised boys and knew the look a man gets when he is done being pushed. "Good," she said. "I wish my mother had done the same 2 years ago." That afternoon I took a walk to the cemetery. Snow deepened the quiet there, and my boots made small, honest sounds. I brushed a thin layer from Mary's name and told her what had happened. The filing, the clerk, the way the judge's words bracketed our future. You told me paper holds, I said. You were right. I stood there until my ears stung, then wrapped the scarf tighter and headed home. For a few days the house felt like a room after a storm passes. The air freshly scrubbed, the colors sharper. I repaired the porch board I had stepped over so many times that stepping over it had become part of the path. I trimmed the hedge. I stacked firewood in the neat cubes Mary liked because she said there was a beauty to rectangles that could not be found in piles. And then Ray found a new door to rattle. He started with an audience. Sunday afternoon, after the church service ended and I was working my way down the stairs slow on old knees, I heard my name said in a tone I recognized, a tone that tries to sound wounded and ends up sounding theatrical. Ray was at the bottom of the steps talking to two women I have known 20 years. His hands were tucked into his armpits for warmth, but it looked like he was hugging himself for sympathy. After all I did for them, after everything I helped with when Aunt Mary was sick, he was saying, he just closed the door on me, signed my family out of our legacy. I am not saying it is illegal. I am saying it is cold I did not walk past. I stopped one step up from ground level so I could look down and not make it a contest of height or age. Ray, I said, steady. We can talk, but we will not do it in the church stairwell. The women looked like they wanted to be anywhere else. Ray smiled that late smile of his and spread his hands. I am just telling the truth, he said. Tell it to my face then, I said. Let us not burden ladies trying to get home to roast a chicken. The women fled gratefully. Ray took one step toward me and lowered his voice. You have turned people against me. I did not say a word to them, I said. You did. He held my gaze too long, like a man waiting for a dog to blink. Come on, he said. Just admit you want to punish me. I felt the old heat rise and let it turn to something denser. This is not revenge, I said. It is correction. He snorted and looked theatrically at the ceiling. You love that line? I love a fence that holds, I said. I love a paper that tells the truth. I love my wife's name where it belongs. You are hiding behind a dead woman, he said, quick and nasty. The words hit and slid off, not because they did not hurt, but because I had put on the right coat. No, I said, I am standing beside her. He made a sound meant to be a laugh and failed. You think this is over because some judge swatted a fly? I can appeal. I can drag this through court until you cannot drive at night anymore. So spend your money on paper that does not hold, I said. I will spend mine on salt for the steps and cocoa for my granddaughter. Keep acting noble, he said. We will see how it looks when people start asking questions about your mental capacity and whether Marcus took advantage of you. And people will answer, I said. People like Evelyn. People like the notary who looked me in the eye and said I was doing right. Marcus is not family, he said. He is now in the only way that matters, I said. He helps me keep the rest of you honest. I did not stay to see what face he made. I stepped past him into the bright cold and went home through air that hurt in a way that earns you sleep. The next week, a letter came with my name misspelled in a way that made me think Ray had dictated it fast and the typist had gotten bored. It threatened equitable relief. Marcus sent 2 lines back that might as well have been number. The house sighed, relieved. That night, while I was washing dishes, the doorknob turned. The new deadbolt did its job like a quiet bodyguard. Ray rattled the handle and called my name. We do not need to be like this, he said through the door. Open up. I did not move. You do not need to be on my porch after dark, I said. Go home. I just want to talk, he said. I want you to see reason. We can make a plan. You can downsize. I will call the police, I said calmly, if you are not off my steps by the time the watch finishes this minute. What watch? He said, mocking, and then the minute ended with the softest click in the house. He heard it through the wood. He left. He did not slam the storm door. Some doors are so old they will not allow it. The next morning, the mechanic called to tell me he had run his hands over every inch of the Outback and the new lines were holding. "You are good," he said. "Come by if anything feels wrong." The relief in his voice told me he had spent a night worrying too. It made me like him more. I took the car out on the flatter road, the one that skirts the valley. I drove without the radio on. There is a sound a safe car makes, confidence in the brakes, quiet in the engine, that cannot be faked. I breathed with the watch. I remembered 100 small drives with Mary, from the time we had to pull over so she could take a pebble from her shoe to the time she cried at a sunset and pretended she had something in her eye. "We are all right," I said out loud, and the car believed me. When I returned, there was a message from my bank that a small, recurring transfer had tried to run and failed. I had already canceled it. Seeing the word "failed" on my behalf made me feel a private victory that I did not need to share with anyone. I wrote, "No more drips," and underlined it. Spring arrived by fits and starts. A bird discovered the maple outside and treated it like a stage. I found the rhythm of Thursdays at pottery and Tuesday evenings in the woodworking shop. I made a mug the color of pines and a rectangular box for the scarf, which I sanded until my fingertips knew the grain better than my eyes did. I carved Mary's initials and oiled the lid until they darkened like a secret in a good way. The instructor, a lean man with kind hands, mentioned he volunteered at Legal Aid. "We are seeing more cases like yours," he said. "The good news is, more people know the words to ask for help." At the library support group, Vince said, "On good days, I do not want to set the world straight anymore. I just want to tell the truth about my little corner." We all nodded. I told them about the stairwell scene and the door at night. Carla, who has a brother like Ray and a smile that will not quit, said, "One of the best things I learned is that ignoring is not cruelty. It is choosing to spend your attention where it pays dividends." That made it into the ledger. One Saturday, the children's librarian asked if I would help a man find resources about trusts. He looked like a night that had gone too long. I showed him to the shelf, pulled a plain-spined book on protecting your home, and put a finger on the chapter he needed first. "Start with the words," I said. "Then get a professional." Paperwork is not scary. It is like a fence. It does not care why you build it, only that you set the post straight. He thanked me with the kind of gratitude that might change a week. In May, my daughter asked if I would speak plainly to her about Ray, the way she wished I had when she was younger, and I wanted to keep the peace more than I wanted to tell the truth. We sat at the kitchen table and I slid the ledger toward her. I did not open to the list of numbers like a prosecutor. I opened to the entries that said what those numbers meant. I let her read, then put my finger on one line. "This is not revenge. It is correction." "He called me," she said, eyes still on the page. "Tried to pull me into the middle." "You are not a rope," I said. She smiled and looked older and younger at once. "Neither are you," she said. June brought a date in the mail. The court's final stamp on Ray's dismissed petition. Marcus sent me a copy with the phrase, "with prejudice," underlined once more, as if I might forget. I did not paste it into the ledger right away. I set it under the watch for a day the way a man puts a letter under a rock to let the wind have a bite of it first. Then I glued it in. The paper felt heavy in my hands. On a cool morning, I drove the mountain road on purpose, not to tempt fate. To decide that fear does not get to live in the same room as the scarf and the watch and the truth I had written. I kept the car slow on the first turn and let it stretch on the straightaway. I did not talk much. I did say her name. I did touch the pocket watch between my finger and thumb like a talisman that clicks. By July, Ray's truck was gone. People love to remark on vehicles. "Saw a tow hook at his place," a neighbor said, a little too cheerfully. I recorded it like weather. Another neighbor said he had moved back with his mother. I recorded that too. I did not like how satisfaction tasted. I spit it out. The ledger is not for gloating. It is for record. In late July, my daughter invited me on a road trip to Minnesota to see Mary's sister Jean. We drove in my daughter's van, and I brought the scarf folded and the watch in my pocket, its chain coiled like a small snake that only knows how to be harmless. The miles passed like beads sliding through fingers. At a diner in Wisconsin, a waitress called me Han and refilled my coffee without asking. Mary would have liked her, my daughter said softly. At the lake, Jean pressed my hands and said, "She would be proud of you, you know." I did not argue. I dipped the scarf in the water where Mary had learned to swim and let it dry on a rock, the wool finding a new note in its scent, pine and fresh algae and something clean. When we returned, I opened the ledger and created a new section at the back, Investments in Joy. The first entry was that trip. Cost, a number. Return, names for the inside of the heart. August kept its promise of heat. I attended an elder law seminar in a county basement where the coffee was weak and the advice strong. A woman attorney explained the difference between revocable and irrevocable in terms even I could remember walking out the door. The more you document, she said, the less someone's opinion matters later. Marcus sat in the back row like he was not supposed to be proud in public. I wrote the phrase down and underlined it. In September, a message pinged from Ray's cousin Sandra, who had been silent for years. "I am sorry for his behavior," she wrote. "He is drowning and wants to grab anything nearby." Your refusal to jump in is not cruelty. It is sanity. I printed the message and put it in the ledger. Sandra had given me a sentence worth keeping. In October, something broke that had nothing to do with Ray. The water heater died with a sigh and a puddle. I called the plumber and paid for the kind of replacement that lets you sleep without listening for leaks. I wrote, "Hot water is comfort," and found myself smiling at the plainness of it. The ledger is not only a shield against exploitation, it is a history of how a man gets through a year with heat and dignity. On Halloween, I handed out candy to witches and superheroes. A small boy dressed as a clock, cardboard face, painted hands, stared at my pocket watch with reverence. "It does not need batteries," I told him. "It needs attention." He nodded as if filing away a life rule. December brought snow like a curtain. Thanksgiving had been warm with company. Now the house returned to itself. A plain envelope with a stamped return address arrived. Ray's handwriting, careful for once. Inside, a Christmas card with a picture of a cabin and a single blue word, peace. No apology, no ask. For the first time, there was nothing to reply to. I set it under the watch for a day, then moved it to the ledger and wrote, "He sent a word I can answer by staying where I am." January turned old without asking my permission. The community center started a memoir group. I went, not because I wanted to write a book, but because there are things that will not sit still unless you put them in sentences. Our first assignment was to write about a moment that changed us. I wrote about the mechanic's red rag and the way the word cut reshaped a day. I wrote about the pocket watch being a metronome that made a run turn into a walk. I wrote about the sound of the notary's stamp and how it felt like the first solid step on ground that looked like ice. When I read it aloud, a woman named Margaret put a hand to her chest and said, "That is what steady sounds like." February handed me a small gift in the form of a high school student named Luis, who comes on Saturdays to teach seniors technology. He talked me into making a digital twin of the ledger. He made me laugh at my own reluctance. We typed for an hour at a time, and he told me which formula would total a column without making me feel like I had given up the beauty of handwriting. When the numbers at the bottom matched the ones in the leather book, he grinned. "Redundancy," he said, as if it were a flavor. I paid him with a batch of oatmeal cookies and a story about my father's watch. He said, "That is better than a tip." March arrived with snowdrops and melt. On a Monday morning, the phone rang and Ray's voice came through in a register I had not heard in a long time. Honest tired. "I filed for bankruptcy," he said without preface. I am telling you because I did not list you. I cannot pay you back." He cleared his throat. "I am moving." I almost said I was sorry. Then I did not. "I hope you land somewhere you can stand up," I said. He did not reply right away. "You are not going to yell?" he asked, like noise was what made things real. "I am not," I said. "I do not live there anymore." He exhaled. "You could have given me a chance," he said, "because old scripts do not burn easy." "I gave you $20,000 worth of chances," I said. "I gave you silence that weighed more than that. Today I will give you this, my attention for one more minute." He did not use it to ask for anything. He used it to breathe, then say, "Goodbye, Uncle," with the word uncle carrying none of its usual hooks. He hung up before I could say goodbye back. I put the phone down and wrote in the ledger, "Account closed." Lesson: boundaries protect love. A week later, a friend from the support group, Vince, met me for a sandwich. He asked how it felt. "Strange," I said. "Like a room after someone leaves. You can still smell their cologne, but it is fading." He nodded and said the line he likes best. "The law is a fence, not a weapon." We said it together like a psalm. Spring opened the windows. I took the Subaru down the mountain again, not to confront anything, but to drive because a man is allowed to do that without giving it a name. The brakes held, and so did I. At the turnout where the valley opens like a palm, I pulled over and said Mary's name and let the watch tick while the world breathed. I thought about the first kiss we ever had and the last spoonful of pudding I fed her when she could not hold a spoon. The space between those moments is a universe you cannot write down, but you can draw a line around it and call it home. In August, I saw a for sale sign in front of the building Ray had been living in. A week later, I stood across the street while an excavator took the walls apart like a cruel child with a gingerbread house. Dust lifted and drifted. I felt a pang that had nothing to do with Ray and everything to do with time. Structures fall. Stories can be erased by machines. Paper helps. Words help. The ledger helps. I went home and wrote, "If I do not tell it true, someone else will tell it wrong." At the end of August, I hosted the support group in the backyard. We ate the kind of food that tastes right outside. When the sun went down, I took out the watch and said, "This kept time for 3 men." It kept me steady when a boy I loved tried to turn me into a resource. We passed it around. Each person held it for a breath. Carla whispered, "Heavier than I expected." Vince said, "Like a small, reliable heart." When it came back to me, I wrapped Mary's scarf around my shoulders even though the night was warm. The ledger lay open on the kitchen table waiting for me to write. Hosted friends who do not ask for anything I do not have. September brought the town fair. I walked past craft stalls and the smell of frying dough. An old woman at a leather stand offered to condition the ledger's cover. "No charge," she said, rubbing oil into the scrapes like they were stories too. "Consider it part of the tale." I wrote later, "Kindness is a currency that multiplies when spent." October saw me in Marcus's office one more time, not for panic, but for review. We opened the ledger and the digital twin, and he shook his head like a man who had just watched a fence survive wind. "You have created a record," he said. "This will save your daughter 100 hours someday." I did not apologize for being old enough to think about my own end. We all get there. The point is to put clean footprints down as we go. In November, the house creaked in the cold the way old houses do, like bones remembering their weight. I wrote, "The house talks to me." It says, "I am here because you said so." I wrote under it, "Maybe I am here because I said so too." There are pages a man writes that he does not show anyone. That one is for me. Near Thanksgiving, a package arrived that I did not expect. A small box with no return address. Inside was a cheap metal chain and a watch that did not work. No note. A joke. A jab. I weighed it in my hand and decided not to feed the meaning with attention. I put it in a drawer and wrote, "Not every hook deserves a fish." Then I went back to brining a turkey. My daughter and granddaughter arrived with laughter and the kind of food that makes your plates clank. We set an extra fork at Mary's place because we always do. We ate and told stories that did not hurt to tell. In December, I took a photograph of the scarf, the watch, and the deed on top of the ledger. 3 anchors, 3 elements that cannot be mistaken for one another and cannot function without each other. I glued the photo to the inside back cover, then wound the watch and said, "Happy New Year, Mary," a week early because I could. The year does not need our permission to turn. We can still be courteous. The last page I wrote that year was not numbers. It was a sentence. If you do not choose your boundaries, someone anxious will choose them for you. The line looked like advice scrawled on a chalkboard where only I attend class. Still, I kept the chalk. On a cold, bright morning in early January, I found myself walking past the mechanic's bay on purpose. He waved with a hand in a glove stiff with work. "How is she running?" he called. "True," I said. "That is the word I want." He nodded. "Then I want that for you," he said, and went back to lifting a hood. In March, the library asked if I would speak at a community evening about the small things that help people avoid big trouble. I stood at a podium no one had used for anything important in years and said what I knew. Write it down before it becomes smoke, bring in a lawyer before the shouting, change a lock before a hand decides to test it, and keep a watch that reminds you the minute will end, whether you fill it with panic or with steadiness. A man at the back raised his hand and asked, "What about forgiveness?" "Forgiveness is a gift," I said, "but even gifts need to be wrapped. Boundaries are the ribbon." He nodded, not convinced but listening. On the first warm evening of spring, I sat on the porch with the scarf folded beside me on the chair and the watch face up on the armrest, ticking in the light. I opened the ledger and put a ribbon in to mark the place where Ray's account ended. It felt right to mark it. The page after was clean. I wrote, "Life is not less dramatic for being calm." Then I wrote, "House secure." Then I wrote, "Love is a boundary you keep for yourself, so you can keep it for others." I did not hear from Ray in months. The silence grew like ivy over a fence, softening the edges. Every so often, I would think of him the way you think of a road you do not take, because you finally learned where it goes. Then I would wind the watch, wrap the scarf before stepping out into air that still has teeth, and lock the door, not from fear, but from respect, for what is inside, for who I have become, for the woman whose name is written on this land like a blessing and a promise. One morning, months later, my granddaughter climbed onto my lap with the watch. "Tell me a story," she said. The old demand softened by the way she rested her head against my chest, listening to a heart that still works. "Once," I said, "a man let paper take the shouting so his house could go quiet. He learned to say no, and it sounded like yes to his own life. He learned to wind a watch and keep time with himself. He learned that correction is not a punishment. It is the route to kindness that lasts. He learned to speak to a nephew without hatred and to a memory without begging. He learned, finally, to put a scarf away not because he was done with it, but because it deserved a place." "That is a good story," she said. "It is not over," I said. "Good stories keep time." She traced the face of the watch with her finger. "It is heavier than it looks," she said. "That is because it is carrying 3 lives," I said. She nodded as if she knew them all. Later, when the house was quiet again and the afternoon settled like a cat on a warm rug, I opened the ledger to a new page and wrote what I could have written the first day, but only understood now. It was never about a house a nephew wanted. It was about a man deciding whether to live the rest of his years as a resource or as a person. It was about whether love means saying yes until you disappear or saying no until you can stand at your own window and watch the light move across your own floor. It was about a scarf that held warmth longer than a winter, and a watch that told me the minute would end and I would still be here. It was about not going over a guardrail that had nothing to do with the mountain. You, reading this, you who keep forgiving and calling it kindness, who keep opening the door because you worry that closing it will make you mean, ask yourself, what do you owe the people you love if not your whole, steady self? Would you recognize the sound of correction over revenge if it came from your own hand on your own door? I capped my pen and listened to the watch. I let the room be ordinary and glorious at the same time. Outside, children pulled sleds over patchy snow that did not care it was spring by the calendar. Inside, the scarf waited in its box, the ledger thick with living, and the deed rested where it belonged. Not because I fought a war to keep it, but because I learned to write a line and mean it. After woodworking class, I walked home slow. I am learning to move at the speed of a watch instead of at the speed of other people's emergencies. The scarf was warm. The ledger waited open. I wrote, built a box for her scarf. Put the smell of cedar into wood that will outlast me. The entry looked like a man putting a picture on a mantle. The first half of this part of my life ends here, on an ordinary Tuesday night when snow tapped the window and the watch ticked the minutes toward 9. The house was warm. The trust papers sat in their red folder like well-behaved dogs. The ledger lay open with that photograph of the 3 anchors glued inside the back. I put my hand on the leather and thought of what still needed telling. The summer when Ray threw his last stone at the courts, and the way the word dismissed can change the temperature of a room. The August when I passed the watch around a backyard fire and watched men weigh history. The day in late spring when I drove the mountain road on purpose and said Mary's name out loud at the guardrail. For tonight, it was enough to wind the watch, fold the scarf into its box, close the ledger, and say to the quiet room, this is not revenge. It is correction. The room understood. The world outside maybe less so, but it would learn. Have you ever turned paper, cloth, and metal into a shield? Are you ready to stitch your own scarf of boundaries? Please share your thoughts in the comments.
My grandpa's words really happened. I believe him. If you want more true tales stories like this, hit subscribe.